Frankenstein and his monster is one of the most iconic and recognisable stories ever told. It has been retold across cinema for the past 100 years, from family animated movies to screwball comedies to action-adventure movies. But its most notable interpretation was way back in 1931 and 1935, and I would argue it's never been topped, and it's shaped the landscape of gothic horror as we know it today. Probably the best example of their influence in the modern day is Tim Burton. You may have heard of him. You could grab any number of his films and see the comparison between them, and he hasn't shied away with it with films like Frankenweenie and Edward Scissorhands, which feel like direct odes to old monster movies like Frankenstein. But with it being October and Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein coming out next month, there isn't really a more perfect time for me to talk about it. Plus, it gives me a chance to talk about two of my favourite movies ever, Frankenstein 1931 and the greatest horror sequel ever made, Bride of Frankenstein. Before we do that though, if you're new here, I'm Kyle. I do movie reviews, film discussions, things like that. So if that sounds like it's your thing, don't forget to like and subscribe because it really means the world to me. As you can probably tell, I'm a massive fan of Frankenstein. I got my Monsters t-shirt on here. For the sake of this video, I am going to keep it spoiler free just in case someone hasn't seen these movies and wants to experience them for the first time, because they are so worth it. So, Frankenstein. It's iconic. Although there were plenty of monster horror films before this film set the bar for monster horror and what it would go on to become. It's pretty easy while watching this to see why it's been gimmicked and remade for nearly 100 years. This could very much be a silent film, with stunning gothic imagery and big booming sets that tell a story all on their own. This thing is a marvel to look at. It's pretty easy to see while watching this that Hollywood was transitioning from its silent era to talkies, because a lot of the film by today's standards could be considered static. There isn't really any flashy camera work or editing. A lot of the time the camera will just remain in the same spot during the entire scene, and while that may be a turn off to some people, I love it because there isn't a single moment in this film where you don't have this insane backdrop where every building is just towering over the characters and is inflicting shadows on every corner of the screen. You kind of do just have to sit back and just take it all in, because there are so many just insane wides in this that really just make your jaw drop. Although this film isn't a faithful adaptation of the original book by Mary Shelley, its core values still remain. A man playing God, a deeply misunderstood creature who is just scared and confused, and how the mob mentality can rob people of any sense or reason. And I still find it to be an incredibly powerful story. And for what they originally had in Mary Shelley's book, it would have been pretty hard to adapt back in 1931. And the film does an excellent job of transferring those themes that hit so hard in the original novel, while also being truly transcendent and cinematic. It's pretty hard to talk about Frankenstein without talking about Boris Karloff. To me, there will never be a better version of this character. He set the standard for what it took to give this character life. And it is mostly a physical performance because he can't talk in this. Every movement and action he makes in this is so purposeful. There isn't a moment that goes by in this film where you're not intoxicated with his performance as the monster. And you want to know the crazy thing? There wasn't a blueprint. This is the first version of Frankenstein's monster. Everything he does here is purely original. I think it says a lot that this is what we imagine Frankenstein's monster as today. Nearly 100 years on, and he is still the definitive version of Frankenstein's monster. As much as I do love this film, it isn't without its flaws. I've never really liked how they've changed Victor's name to Henry. I understand the reason of it probably being more relatable to audiences back then, but it has always kind of been a head scratcher moment for me, and I don't think it's a choice that has aged very well. Also, I mentioned how Boris Karloff's performance in this is phenomenal. Well, there is a performance in this that drags it down quite a bit for me, and it's kind of something you can look past because of the time it came out. It's the performance of Victoria, Henry's wife. I can find her kind of grating, I can't lie. She does have a bit of a dry performance, and it is kind of noticeable when comparing it to everyone else in the film. Fortunately, it was rectified in its sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, and she was recasted. But to be honest, those feel like nitpicks to me. This film is great, I absolutely love it. And you know the crazy part? There's an even better version of Frankenstein. Bride of Frankenstein is a masterpiece. James Whale really said, "Oh, you'd like that other Frankenstein movie? Watch this." Bride of Frankenstein took everything from its predecessor that made it great and iconic and stuffed it up with steroids. Literally every single detail of this film is improved upon from the last. And not only is it improved upon, it is masterful. I mentioned earlier how the first Frankenstein could have been considered static because Hollywood was obviously going through a transition phase from silent to talkies. And as much as I love the original, and that was kind of a drawback, Bride of Frankenstein doesn't have that whatsoever. Sound films were fully established by this point, as this came out 4 years after, and James Whale, the director, is given full creative freedom to just go all out insane with amazing camera work, editing and style. It just moves at a great speed, and the entire film does feel timeless, whereas the first Frankenstein may be considered a little slow and maybe doesn't attract the attention unless you love classic horror movies like me and you guys. This film is just stuffed with iconic moments. Whether you want one of the most heartwarming sequences of all time where the monster meets the blind man, and the monster for the first time ever in his life is shown a shred of kindness and is shown what it means to have a friend. It's honestly one of my favourite moments in cinema ever, and I challenge anyone to watch it without crying. You won't. Or you can have one of the greatest reveals of all time, where Frankenstein finally brings the bride to life, and with only around 4 minutes of screen time has become one of the staples of horror. This film is also thoroughly entertaining because it is drop dead hilarious. There are so many over-the-top comedy moments in this, and with the inclusion of Una O'Connor, who is also in other Universal monster movies, that was only inevitable because she is so funny. She steals every scene and she just makes me laugh every single time. I told you earlier, Karloff set the standard for what it takes to play this character. He's even better here. In the previous film, he was really only giving a physical performance and he couldn't speak or really show emotion in any sort of deep way. The monster has a real character here. Not that the previous version didn't have a character, but it was very one-noted and it only really had one thing to say. The monster gets to speak here, and in that, Karloff is able to just completely unleash one of the best performances of all time. Karloff is really given the freedom to just act, and it's still incredible to me that he topped the last performance. Bride of Frankenstein is a masterpiece. As you can tell, I love these films. I'm so excited for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. I cannot wait. And if you haven't seen these movies, I hope this video has persuaded you to go and watch them. What's your favourite Frankenstein movie? Are you excited for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein? And as always, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and go watch some movies.